You're listening to the Meet the Farmers podcast with me, your host, Ben Eagle. Please remember to subscribe to the show wherever you are listening. Hello everyone, I'm Ben Eagle and welcome to this second episode in this latest mini-series about trees on farms, which is being produced in association with Forestry Commission. Now last time, and if you haven't listened to episode 1, please go back and listen to that. We were talking about the why of woodland management on farms. This time we're throwing the floor open to your questions about farm woodland management and about trees generally, I suppose, in the countryside and on farms. And today I'm hosting alone as I'm putting the questions to my usual Forestry Commission co-host, Jon Burgess. He's on the panel. Jon is a Woodland Resilience Officer at the Ep2. I'm also joined by Simon James, who is Woodland Management and Policy Senior Manager at the Small Woods Association, and James Ramskir-Gardiner, who is the National Agroforestry Advisor at the Forestry Commission. Welcome, everyone. How are you doing? I mean, I wonder if you could start by just giving us a little bit more of an introduction to what you do. James, do you want to start with you?
Yeah, thank you very much. So I've got kind of two halves to my job, really. One half is I'm working with DEFRA and other stakeholders to help develop the grant schemes and regulations for agroforestry in England. And the other half of my job is effectively to upskill and support both the forestry and farming sectors to do agroforestry.
Brilliant. Simon?
Hello, everyone. Yeah, I work for Small Woods Association, which is a charity, UK-wide charity. We have a membership, about 2,500 members, mainly woodland owners, but we also have managers, workers, enthusiasts, and supporters of our charity and the work that we do. So we look at helping small woodlands thrive. So this is through woodland management, through training, and also support, as in woodland management plans and also woodland management work. So I look after the woodland management side. Also have presence in Wales, which is known as Coed Lleol, and they do a lot of social forestry work.
Fantastic. And I mean, Jon, anyone who's listened to either the last episode or indeed the first series will know you well by now, but can you just let us know about what you do as well?
Yeah, thanks, Ben. Just in a nutshell, Woodland Resilience Officer. So I help people design woodlands that are fit for the future. So that's new woodland creation schemes or how to manage their woodlands in the face of climate change.
Great. Well, I, for one, am definitely looking forward to this panel session today. We've got a number of different questions from many from farmers, different parts of the UK, actually. So the Forestry Commission is focused on England, but we have some questions which are broader as well. And our first question is from Rachel Madeley-Davis.
How does the panel think that we can reset the food production versus tree debate?
How does the panel think we can reset the debate here? Jon, we start with you on that.
Yeah, I mean, that is a kind of classic question. We've ended up in a country where people are either farmers or they're foresters, and we just need to blur those boundaries. And hopefully James will talk about agroforestry, and that's one of the best blurs that we have at the moment. But just to recap, in case anyone's missed it, that we are 60 to 70% food secure in this country, but we're only 20% timber secure. So we import 80% of our timber. So it's just the sort of the highest bidder wins in some ways. So the most economic land use will be the one that the land manager chooses, and that produces kind of suboptimal outcomes for nature, maybe for downstream flooding, maybe for other things. And if we just accept that trees have a place within farms, or that just there's a more wooded landscape as a whole, because we have very, very little tree cover. So I talk in terms of increasing the tree cover rather than increasing the amount of farmland and removing forests. we can start to get the benefits of those trees on the farm. We can start to get those benefits of the trees off farm. I think we just do that by having more integrated decision making and not be so beholden to the money aspect of it. If we have that more diverse landscape, it will also be more resilient.
Okay. James, obviously agroforestry begins to blur these sorts of boundaries, I suppose, integrating both within the landscape. Your thoughts on this?
Absolutely. Well, that is why I'm passionate and work in agroforestry, is that I believe it is what is needed. Jon summed it up perfectly there. We're a small island with 70 million people on it. We need to utilize our land really efficiently to create both food and timber. I agree with pretty much everything Jon has just spoken about there. The thing I would add is where I got a lot of aspirations for agroforestry is what it can bring to the rural economy and kind of culture. We're looking at a landscape where more and more people are leaving it rather than joining it. And by opening up this kind of avenue of trees on farms, bringing in other people to work on the farm alongside the farmer to help manage and maintain those trees, you're bringing more people to working in the countryside, increasing the populations of some of our really rural habitats. That for me is a really exciting kind of aspect for it. How we reset the debate, I guess it's a mindset shift. I'm still working on how we do that, but it's definitely something that needs to happen, and I think it's picking up a pace. Like, interest is really, really growing, where we can do both agricultural and forestry work on the same land rather than either or.
And Simon, I mean, farmers obviously clearly see themselves first and foremost as food producers. You do as a farmer, but increasingly farmers are expected to undertake lots of other practices, and especially with the environmental hat on as well. Where do trees sit within this, and do we need to reset this debate? Is this a mindset thing, as James is alluding to there?
I think the word reset is possibly the most important bit there, because it's suggesting that whatever we're doing at the minute isn't working. And so for me, we talk a lot about food security, but maybe we should be thinking maybe climate security, so securing ourselves against the harshest climatic events. So I think that trees will play a big role in that net zero society that we're aiming for. So when I think about maybe resetting, I think we do need to get those land managers together and to actually consider kind of the best use for land. And that's where hopefully they can strike that balance that we need to feed the nation. It sounds a bit Churchillian, but, feed the nation and secure a climate that we can successfully grow the food in. But I also think that we need to talk about what it means to individuals, so individual farmers, because government talk about thousands of hectares, but we really need to distill that and talk about what that really means. So let's say Wales is 2 million hectares. We're only looking to plant 2% of the land in Wales. So, is that really going to drastically harm food security? I don't think it will. We just need to kind of rehash the things that we've been saying to make it understandable and allow people to buy into it.
Looking through my list of questions, there's actually another one which sort of links to this. What are the Forestry Commission doing to make planting trees more attractive to farmers? So this is sort of almost a why should question. And the question goes on to say, for example, there are dairy farmers in the Black Forest of Germany who plant trees to benefit livestock. So how does the Forestry Commission plan to bridge the gap between farming and forestry? As this is an FC directed question, Jon, I'm going to go straight over to you.
I find that a really sort of slightly tricky question, because it's more sort of bouncing it back to the farmers. Like, to make a tree more attractive, I can give a whole list of reasons as to why a farmer may want to benefit or may benefit from having that tree on the farm. I won't start listing them here. Go back to the first mini series we did where we covered that in great detail. So it comes down to perhaps more of a just a sort of a mindset thing, and to what is the blocker to accepting trees onto the farm. We can show plenty of evidence where having some trees will increase farm productivity, and perhaps the others have figures to back that up, or to diversify the farm income. So you start to take a harvest of firewood, you start to take the crop of the fruits and nuts, as well as just thinking of it as a timber crop. So it's not losing productivity. So it's like, what is the blocker? Is it economic? Well, then plant a crop that will be economic. Is it actually what most of the research comes down to, that it's a cultural thing? It's just that silo, as I referred to in the last answer, between being a farmer or being a forester. You can't be both in some people's mindset. So, I found that a very tricky question to answer, but it's, for whatever the particular reason is, it's great. We can have a conversation and try to find a way through to find a place for those trees on that farm's landscape.
James, you speak to a lot of farmers, and in many ways, your entire role really is bridging the gap between farming and forestry. So, just leading on from Jon's point there, I suppose questioning what are the blockers in farmers' minds. But what are your thoughts on this, on bridging that gap?
For a big part of it, it's a cultural identity issue. As Jon said, farmers want to farm, and a lot of farming practices we've carried out for the last 100 years have very much not included trees. If anything, they have removed. They've been the cause of removing a lot of trees and hedgerows in our landscape. It's reverting back to some farming practices and ideologies we had before the Second World War. Where every farm had its own farm woodland, which was managed and maintained as part of the farm unit to provide timber resources for the farm. A way I think we can approach it now, 100 years later, is by not necessarily expecting the farmer to be a forester. There is no one who would support them more to be a forester than me if a farmer was interested, but I don't believe they need to be. Where I think some work maybe need to be done is around having multiple people working and managing a farm, but just different aspects of it. I work an awful lot with small kind of grassroots organizations around the country who have got plenty of people who are really, really interested in working in woodlands and on farms dotted around the country. And I think if a farmer can find their friendly neighborhood woodworker or woodsman or woodswoman to come and help support them and to manage the tree component on their farm, I think that could be a really productive relationship.
Simon was talking about the Welsh situation in his first answer, so we are going to head to our next question.
Hello, my name is James Powell. I'm a sheep, beef, pig and tourism farmer from Llandrindod Wells in mid Wales. And my question is, does the panel know just how many trees we would need to plant the Welsh Government's aspiration for 43,000 hectares of trees by 2030 and 180,000 hectares by 2050? Where will we get all these trees from? And can they possibly be all native, or does that not matter? And that's also a lot of plastic guards to break up and clog the countryside watercourses.
Simon?
Well, I suppose the initial answer is looking at a number of stems per hectare that you could calculate exactly how many, or roughly how many trees you'd need. So 43,000 hectares would probably equate to something around 48 million to 68 million trees, which is a lot of trees. But there are nurseries out there, and figures show that there are, say, 150 million trees being produced a year, roughly, in terms of tree supply. It's there. It's also scalable. A lot of the nursery operations are scalable. They would just need to utilise more land, but there is a potential of scalability. And to declare a pecuniary interest, as this is a Forestry Commission podcast, at Smallwoods, we're in receipt of the Tree Production Capital Grant, which is a fantastic grant to help establish nurseries or to upgrade and evolve existing nurseries. So we are not one of the big boys, but we're certainly looking to develop a community tree nursery. Community as in we are hoping to bring in people that are disadvantaged and possibly have well-being issues and things like that to help us plant the trees, to sow the seeds and propagate. And we're looking at, in the initial year, at producing about 10,000 trees, and then that will be scaled up to hopefully about 32,000 trees per year going forward. So we're really looking forward to getting this off the ground and contributing to those vast numbers of trees required.
Okay, Jon, I'm going to go to you on this next. Perhaps you can reflect on the native, non-native part of that question, but also the question more broadly. We've of course, even in the last episode actually as well, we were addressing that.
There's some scarily large numbers there. So the 2050 figure, you're talking 300 million trees. Wow. Just to put that into context, a mature birch tree produces about 1 million seeds a year. So it's not, for nature, it is not a challenge at all. What we need to do is, if we're going to use natural regeneration as alongside the nursery stock, absolutely, Simon talked very eloquently about increasing the nursery sector. But if we were to use some natural regeneration to help support those tree woodland creation targets, nature's our best friend in this. But we have to control the grazing. And that's what the plastic tree tubes do very effectively. But we don't need to use plastic tree tubes. We can use fencing. And that is possibly where we should be looking when we're talking about that kind of scale of woodland creation. Tree tubes are great for sort of little copses of 50 trees. But once you get above about a hectare, then it becomes more economic to put in a fence. That removes that question about the plastic and the carbon emissions from the plastic and the degradation of the plastic going into the watercourses. So I'd steer people that way. But Ben, you asked me about the native. My job is to get people to think about trees that are suited to the future. Now, that means you have to understand what the climate is going to do on your site. Are you on the top of a hill? Are you going to increase the wind speeds? Are you on a droughty soil? What is going to be the impact of climate change on your site? Native trees might be fine. They might be great today and great tomorrow. But if you are going to experience large degrees of climate change, and that will be across the UK, the southeast is going to get a lot drier. The southwest is going to get a lot wetter in the winter. The wind speeds, the storm events are going to pick up. So there's a lot of things there that people do need to just plan for. And on some of those sites, native species won't be able to perform terribly well. So where we've lost ash through ash dieback on the limestone, there isn't really a good native tree that will be kind of economically productive. So if you're farming those soils and want to put in trees, then you might need to think, if you want shade for your animals, for example, you might go for pine. I would say that a native part is absolutely essential for the wildlife, but we should look slightly wider.
Let's turn to a management question. I've got one from Ian Farrant, who farms beef and hazelnuts on 600 acres on the Herefordshire-Worcestershire border. And James, I think I'm going to turn to you on this first. The question is, we clearly need to plant more trees to reduce our impact on the climate, but ironically, the longer periods of extreme weather makes establishing trees more difficult. How should we manage young trees in a dry summer? And is it prudent to spend the additional money on an irrigation system?
My first point would be, you want to plant your tree as young as possible. And that will give it the best start in life, should we say, to help navigate some of these tough weather conditions they're going to face. For irrigation wise, where I think the balance needs to be made is the cost of establishing the tree versus the cost of an irrigation system going in. So if you're planting young timber tree saplings that are relatively cheap, it might not stack up. Whereas if you're planting kind of more expensive orchard tree species, that might be the time where there is a cost benefit there to putting an irrigation system in.
Simon, thoughts on managing trees in a dry summer?
Irrigation might be feasible for smaller sites. There is such a thing as a water abstraction license, so you just need to be careful with things like that. But I'm sure farmers are more than aware of those kind of things. And also, when I was thinking about the question, I was thinking that some farmers do have irrigation systems already, so potentially the cost could be quite low in terms of setting something up. In my experience, we've never really used a irrigation system. I once planted an extension to Woodland Wood up in South Yorkshire, and the soil there opened up like a zip. It was synthetically made, if you like, ameliorated the soil. The problem I had there was that the soil didn't actually act like normal soil. It wanted to, once it was cut open, it wanted to stay open, and it dried very quickly. So I think my advice is to actually understand your soil, and you'll know it best if you know been farming the land. You'll know exactly what its characteristics are, and that then would possibly help you decide whether you want to go bare root or cell grown. That will provide the tree, as James was saying, with the best opportunity. The roots, when planting, are the most important part, and you really do need to care for them. Don't let them dry. Don't damage them. Making sure that your tree is, or the roots are completely under the ground. And if you do open the ground to do your notch cut, or even if you're ploughing in the trees, make sure that ground is properly firmly sealed behind it, and that will give it the best chance to stay in a moist environment.
Jon, any tips from you?
Absolutely. I could go on for a very long time with this question. I'm trying to keep it very succinct, though. Get your species right. Building on what Simon was saying, understand your soil. That's absolutely critical. Understand that, the sort of the climate you're in, and then get the species right. So it might mean in a productive agroforestry system, you're not using apple trees as the interrows, but you're going to pick something that is much more drought tolerant, like walnut. You might choose to irrigate for the first year or two. But what you're actually doing is putting moisture into the soil. Well, you could think a slightly different way around in stopping that moisture leaving the soil. So just put down a really good mulch. So when it does rain, that soil, that moisture gets into the soil, and it's not being pulled out by direct sun hitting the soil, or it's not being pulled out by the weed competition. And I think we often underestimate just how effective a sort of a grass sward can be in competition to trees. If we control those weeds for the first couple of years, allow trees to get their roots deep down into the soil, they will tap into moisture that you don't need to replace. So good species choice, get that right in the first instance, and then weed control, mulch, or just some chemical or mechanical weed control to stop that moisture that is in the soil leaving them. Let the trees get in for 1 year or two, and then after that, I don't think we should be irrigating trees in the UK for more than the first couple of years, if we do it at all.
Brilliant. Next up, we have an agroforestry question from Stephen Ware.
Hello, this is Stephen Ware from North Herefordshire, and I have a question in relation to agroforestry. We've been told to plant more trees, and there has been promise of assistance, both financial and with training, for well over 2 years, but nothing has been forthcoming. My question is this, in your belief, a hollow gesture from DEFRA, and do they appreciate the timescale involved with planting, ordering, and growing trees?
Hard-hitting one there. James, I'm going to go straight over to you on that one.
Lovely, thank you. I'm slightly limited with some of the information I can give because it is DEFRA's to announce, not myself. The Forestry Commission, we're working to create and support LANTRA accredited training courses for farmers and foresters to create, manage and maintain agroforestry systems. And we're also starting to hire agroforestry specific or specialised staff within the Commission to work alongside myself to help support farmers with advice, design and management, as well as providing links to the already really great organisations out there, such as the Soil Association, who are doing some really great work with agroforestry. The timescales, DEFRA absolutely appreciates the timescales of trees. As we've already spoken about, we have quite a healthy tree nursery set up in the country. So I feel fairly confident that we have the levels of trees required for the agroforestry schemes, especially when you consider an awful lot of the schemes are going to be planting trees at a much lower density compared to woodland creation. So we will need less trees for the outcome compared to woodland on that same area of land. So that the trees we're growing currently in our nurseries will go a lot further.
Just running on with funding with this, obviously provision of trees is one thing. I suppose labour and time is another. I've got another question here, which is, how does the Forestry Commission plan to upskill farmers to make woodland management a viability? Jon?
Well, I hope Simon will come in on this on the back of my answer, and I'll open the door for him. But it starts with wanting to know more about forestry. So you can take a horse to water, in the old saying. So once we want to learn about forestry, there are so many good foresters out there to learn from, and they share their knowledge quite freely in groups like the Small Woods Association. So that is where I'll sort of open the door. Simon, did you want to come in there? Maybe sort of jump back on the end of that afterwards. But
yeah, absolutely. As like Jon says, Small Woods Association, we're very much looking to upskill people that want to be upskilled, providing training. We have a very good course, Sustainable Woodland Management, which kind of gives you all of the tools and directs you to all the places that you need to go to kind of start managing your woodland sustainably. We're also working closely with Woodland Trust and Sussex Wildlife Trust with regards to lost woods in the low weald and downs area, where we are specifically targeting that area and looking for those small woodlands, and actually hopefully won't come to this, but literally kind of knocking on doors and asking them, please, will you take this training so you can learn how to manage your woodlands. We found that there's lots of neglected and undermanaged woodlands in that area, and we really would like to see that change. We've also got other projects like Network for Resilience projects in the southwest and the east of England, where we are looking to target those that are, let's say, disengaged. They just aren't aware that these things are going on. We're offering training, we're offering advice, and we're offering support. And I think in my travels and the people I speak to, I think farmers take a lot of pride in what they do on their land. And I think training is the key. They need to be told how to do things properly before I think they have the confidence to go out and do it. And I think we see that at, ploughing matches, and even, like Clarkson's farm, when Caleb was teasing Jeremy about his sowing lines being all wobbly and things like that. Farmers really take a pride in what their land looks like and how they use it. So they really do, or they really would benefit from that kind of training. And at the end of it, they don't want to waste money. They want to know how to do something and do it correctly. Talking to others, talking to foresters, talking to agents and managers is really key. Something I'm quite keen on doing is profiling. So looking at individuals within a demographic and seeing how their training journey might look. And so we're not, maybe a farmer, we're not looking to get them a certificate. They don't want a certificate. They just want to know the skills and knowledge that they need to do what they're doing. And so, sending them off on a accredited course just isn't the right thing. It would be better to take them out for a day planting with some planters and they see firsthand exactly how to do a notch cut in the soil and getting those roots in correctly.
Could I just sort of pick up on a little bit more on that? Simon's answered there. I'd say there's sort of two things. One is that whole sort of part of managing a forest and being a forager and production planning and large scale. That's probably not what farmers need. The small scale, the sort of the actual getting a chainsaw, getting a small timber trailer, which you can get funding for, and just going on a chainsaw training course if you haven't, because they are dangerous pieces of equipment. That is one certified course I really would encourage farmers to go on. But that initial sort of like just doing a little bit of firewood thinning, just taking out your needs out of your woodland to feed the farmhouse, that isn't that complex. You can speak to your local Forestry Commission Woodland Officer, make sure you've got a felling license. We will help you make sure that complies with UK Forest Standard. And then it's just sort of like, okay, yeah, just fell a few trees, harvest a bit of timber, process a little bit of firewood, start small, and build the confidence. And just learn kind of by doing, and then sort of seek, when you realize you have a question, then come and ask, sort of the colleagues, your other people in the landscape around you. You have the facilitation fund grouping in quite a lot of places, and just use that network of people and get them to run a woodland event and encourage them to sort of start having that conversation. And then there is help out there when you need to answer this question. So yeah, just start small and just learn by doing. But yeah, chainsaw training course if you are going to take one piece of training.
Let's turn to the money side. Affordability. We've got a question from Sam Kenyon, who farms sheep and goats in North Wales. As a farmer who struggles to find skilled, local, and above all, affordable labour, what plans do the FC have to make small woodland management economically viable? Well, I suppose we can broaden that question out actually generally. So what do we make small woodland management economically viable? Simon, I'm going to go straight back to you, actually.
Yeah, okay. So upskilling yourself and or your farm workers would be a really good start. I've advised people to contact local firewood merchants. They're always looking for new supply, and they may know contractors that could help with woodland management. And as Jon was saying before, start small and, you can build it up and build it up. Also, network. There's going to be other people in your situation, and just talk to them and find out what they're doing. We do a course called Sustainable Woodland Management, and that is a really good opportunity to kind of get to know what you have in your woodland and the potential that your woodland might have. So you might not have thought about it, but potentially starting coppice cycles, firewood, or even branching out into things like biochar. And also, if you did branch out into coppice cycles, I note that you're a goat farmer. Goats love hazelnuts, and that could be a good way to kind of supplement their feed.
James, going to come over to you, and again, maybe not just talking about small woodlands here, but maybe trees in a broader context as well.
I really feel an answer, because we do have a local skilled labour kind of issue in forestry. We don't have enough qualified foresters, both at management and kind of actually working in the forest level. So I feel a way of kind of economically managing farm woodlands is actually to operate in a farming cluster. And instead of trying to just look after and manage your own individual woodland, you team together and work with your neighbouring farmers who will all have their own small bits of woodland, and you start to operate and manage your woodland as a collective whole, maybe in the valley or wherever you're based, to get to the point of where you've got an economy of scale. So you can get a contractor in every few years to do thinning, to do works like that, and it'll be a more attractive job for a contractor to come in and do. And you'll get a better return by sharing the cost amongst several farms rather than each individually trying to do the work yourself.
Jon, finally, some thoughts from you on the general economic viability of small woodland management.
The question does seem to be in two parts. One is sort of the labour supply to get the people to do the work, and my thoughts with that is, like, if you have a more mixed farm, traditionally the sort of the woodland work was a winter job, whereas summer job would require more hands-on the actuals on sort of the food production. So I mean, it could be a way that we just look to kind of recreate that you could have someone coppicing and thinning a woodland during the winter, and then using that product as a fencing contractor during the summer when you can get on the land and put the fence in, and just sort of recreate that kind of cycle in the seasons, where we work the winters outside of bird nesting season, so it would be sort of better for the biodiversity. The second side of the question is about the economically viable, and James touched on there sort of the economies of scale of a large scale, because the forestry machinery just dwarfs farm scale machinery. The timber harvesting is a huge, expensive machine that can just drive up the side of a mountain. But the smaller scale, the skills should be there within the farmer. That kind of small scale timber harvesting is not a million miles away from the skills that the people have. So a small amount of training can help bring a forest into an economic cycle. And just, firewood is a valuable material, but it's that, rather than just selling a lump of wood, if you cut it and chop it, and you can sell it as a finished product, it's that value adding cycle. And again, I'm reminded, we talked about that. We had a really good episode in the first season about that sort of added value. Even just selling some Christmas trees, it's, the tree just grows 4 or 5 years and you're selling it for far more than the weight of the timber. So it's just sort of getting a little bit more familiar with the economic outcome of the potential products that forests can give.
I've got a few questions about ash dieback, which I'm going to bring together, and you can just sort of get your thoughts on these. So, questions about ash dieback. Are there grants to restock woodlands when they're dying? Can I fell dying trees? Should I fell all trees dying of ash dieback? And what are the best species to use to replace them? So, some questions on felling there. Whether there are any grants available and what species to use. Jon, let's go straight back to you.
First of all, think felling license. If you're felling trees, if they're not fully dead, you should just make sure that you have a felling license. If you need one, speak to your woodland officer, Forestry Commission, to go through that. Should I fell them all? Well, fell the dangerous ones, the ones that are over roads, the ones that are over houses. But only then if they're leaning actually over it. If they're leaning back into the woods, then you maybe don't need to fell them, because if they're not going to hit something, they're not actually dangerous. So we are strongly encouraging people to leave trees that are showing signs of disease, because the trees can bounce back. And it's only by seeing trees affected by ash dieback and then sort of reflushing and becoming, we'll know that tree has some inherent genetic resilience, and they're the trees we want to breed from to enhance the ash back in the landscape by breeding in the resilience. So should I fell them all? No, try not to, if it's okay to leave them. Best species to replant with, well, that depends what soil you're on, what site you're on. Come and speak to the Forestry Commission. We can advise you that. We have online tools that can help. Just you put a dot on the map and it tells you what your climate and your wind speed and your rainfall are, and it models what will be good species to replace them with. Very different if you're on limestone to if you're at the bottom of a fertile environment. And grants to restock, we do offer restock grants, and they're different in certain parts of the country. So again, probably the easiest answer here is to say contact your local woodland officer, go on to Forestry Commission pages on gov.uk and just have a look and see what is available. But there is some financial support for the restocking.
And just quickly from you, Simon, any thoughts on managing ash dieback trees?
It's very much a hot topic, and it does really worry our woodland owners. Ash makes up such a high percentage of a lot of woodland species, and so getting ash dieback is quite devastating for some. We do need to make sure health and safety comes first. Jon's already mentioned that. We also need to make people aware that felling trees with ash dieback is a dangerous game, and it's not for everyone. You do need to be aware that trees can shed limbs when felling if they are really dead. So just do everything you can to be as safe as possible. And if the skills aren't there, then make sure you bring somebody in to kind of deal with them. I think it's important to highlight that trees, even though they are declining, they still hold a huge amount of biodiversity value. And so, preempting felling is very detrimental, I think, to the long-term survival of ash trees. We could see genetic resilience, and we hopefully will start seeing tolerant trees in the landscape. Whenever I talk to small woodland owners and go out to site, I always have to mind the Tree Council guidance, which is looking at classes 1 to 4, and this is to do with canopy decline. And that, I think, is a really simple, everyone can kind of estimate roughly the percentage of a canopy. So that's a really good way of quickly identifying trees that need immediate action. And I'd encourage your listeners to have a look at that Tree Council guidance on tree safety.
If I could add another really great bit of guidance out there, recently the organisation LEAF, Linking Environmental Farming, released a document they've been working with in conjunction with Forest Research, which is a really, really accessible guidance document for managing ash dieback on farms.
Fantastic. We'll put a link to that in the show notes, along with any other links that we mentioned today. I'm going to pick one more question that is on coppicing. Is coppicing a beneficial woodland management practice? And how old do the trees need to be to start coppicing? Does this depend on species? Simon?
Well, the answer to that question is absolutely. Coppice does make a really good addition to your woodland. So you can start coppicing hazel. I'm going to pick on hazel for this example, but hazel, you could start cutting that to try and get it to coppice at any stage. We usually cut coppice between years 5 and 10. If you've got many stems on a stall, you'd be looking to go in and start a cycle every 5 or 10 years, basically. So it's a bit like growing in your allotment or your vegetable patch. You don't want to have all of your stalls at a mature age all at once, because you want to make sure that you've got product for every year. Making sure that you kind of compartmentalize your woodland when you're creating your cycle is really important, so you do have that kind of continuity of product coming out. So we usually look at harvesting when the base of the stem is around 7.5 centimeters in diameter, and that will then produce, let's say, a standard product from your stall. So you'd be looking at maybe 1,200 stalls in a hectare, and out of that you could probably get about 25,000 rods. You could make 700 sheep hurdles, 15,000 pea sticks, 600 bean rods, and then you're left with things like thatching wood, stakes, etc. Yeah.
That's great. There's some great practical stats there. I love that. James, any coppicing tips from you?
Oh, I don't know about tips. I must admit a vested interest in this. I came to forestry through coppicing.
Oh, really?
So I do have quite a soft spot for it in my heart. I agree with 100% of everything Simon's just spoken about there. The other thing I'd like to add, and it's maybe not something we've spoken about much yet, is the role of tree fodder and forage on the farm to support livestock farming. Coppicing can be a brilliant way of, I'm going to pick on willow for my example, as I view it as the superfood tree for any livestock agroforestry system. I've seen a few farms now across the country where farmers have planted willow and they're pollarding it, similar, kind of maybe on a 2-3 year cycle. And as Simon said, not cutting it all at once, staggering it across the farm to provide additional feed source for their livestock, whether they're cutting the sticks and just dropping them for livestock to feed on straight away, or they're storing them in a shed for tree hay to feed them during the winter months.
If I can continue the personal journey of forestry that James started there, he talked about coming in through coppice. I came into forestry through veteran trees, ancient trees. And actually, some of the trees we have in our landscape were pollarded, which is coppicing at height. So you cut off above where the animals graze, and then you have that regrowth, which you can use for the reason, for all the things that have just been talked about. And it's that cyclical recutting of a tree that prolongs the life of them. We have more veteran trees in the UK than pretty much any other country in Europe because of the history of woodland management, which when you think about we're talking about agroforestries and can we support agroforestry and the development of agroforestry, it's like our ancient trees are here because we did agroforestry, because our ancestors did agroforestry. They did it so well. We've just lost those skills. So there is nothing, we're not inventing the wheel, we're reinventing the wheel, or the cycle or the cyclical cutting of. Simon talked about hazel, but there are other species that coppice really, really well. So sweet chestnut to provide fencing stakes. It lasts a lot longer than treated softwood. And if we can get that kind of homegrown use, that a farm cuts its own fencing material from its own little coppice, which is, at the top of the hill on that less fertile land, because that's what the sweet chestnut would love. Sweet chestnut is a very drought tolerant tree that's fit for climate change, and all the pieces fall into place. So is coppicing a beneficial woodland practice? Yes, absolutely.
If I could maybe round off this, I could happily talk about for hours, the role of coppicing on farming, but if I could round off this question with a shameless plug for the National Coppice Federation, absolutely get in touch with your local coppicing group. You can find them through the National Coppice Federation. There are many coppice workers or aspiring coppice workers around the country that are desperate for woodland to cut and manage. Again, I'll go back. If the farmer wants to cut and manage the woodland themselves, brilliant. We will support them the whole way. But for any farmer that isn't necessarily interested in taking on that management themselves, but would like to get the benefits of a managed woodland, they can absolutely. There's plenty of people out there who are willing to work with them to do so.
Yeah, this is a really simple question, but we're just going to be bouncing back and forth for a long time now. I do just broaden it ever so slightly. We're talking about coppicing, but I really just need to say that generally woodland management is better for the woodland, better for the landscape, better for biodiversity, better for everything. A sustainably, sensitively managed woodland is much better than an unmanaged woodland for so many things. So yeah, just coppicing is good, but woodland management is also just fantastic.
I think that's a great point to leave it on. That is all we have time for, sadly. But a massive thank you to my panel, to our guests, Simon James, James Ramskir-Gardiner, and Jon Burgess, who will be back as my co-host for the next episode. Thank you very much for listening. And please do share this episode amongst your farming network. We really are trying to get a conversation started about managing trees on farms, managing small woodlands on farms. So you sharing it is a great way of doing that. That would be a great help. Until next time, I'm Ben Eagle. My co-host for this mini-series is Jon Burgess, and this has been a Meet the Farmers mini-series on trees on farms, produced in association with the Forestry Commission. Jon and I will see you next time, when we'll be looking at the how of woodland management through the practical example of creating and implementing a woodland management plan. So I hope you can join us then. Until then, have a great week.